Okay, see.
Just so you know, I got kicked out of the video, so I had to restart. Sorry.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, and we are live, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for standing by. Welcome to today's webinar entitled, What's Important to Employers in a Remote Workforce? I'm Belle Febbraro, Senior Education and Program Manager for the Society of American Military Engineers, coming to you from Alexandria, Virginia. I'll be in the background assisting with any technical issues you may be experiencing. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. So we have the chat features. To your right of your screen, you will see chat. And here is where you can just let us know if you're experiencing any technical difficulties and any discussion points directed to the speaker. Click the chat button. Next, type your comment and send. Let us quickly check the chat feature for attendees on the call. Please type which room in your house you are in your new office and where you are located. So you're sitting in your kitchen right now and you live in Alexandria, Virginia, then type kitchen, Alexandria, Virginia. So hopefully you guys can start adding into the chats right now. Next, we're moving on to the Q&A. To submit a written question at any time during the event, click the Q&A button. Next, type your question and click send. As there are multiple panelists, we ask that you indicate in your question who on the panel you would like to respond. If you'd like a question to be seen in the box, you can also upvote it. We encourage you to ask questions at any time during the presentation, and we will hold all questions until the end. We will answer as many as time allows. Next is the polls. Yes, we have a few of those, and they're so much fun. When the poll pops up, make your selection and submit. Just don't forget to toggle back to the poll to view the results. Handouts. We have uploaded today's presentation ready for you to download at your convenience during this webinar. We would like to thank our sponsors today, the EchoThree Foundation. You will receive 1 PDH credit for today if you are registered for virtual JETC. With that, we invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy today's presentation. It is with our extreme pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Tony Price from Mabbett and Associates, Inc., coming to you directly streaming from Alexandria, Virginia. Tony, you have the digital floor, so take it away.
Thank you, Belle, and hello, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Belle for her just a relentless and outstanding effort in supporting JETC and supporting these conferences. She's the best at this, and we certainly would not be able to do this without her, so thank you, Belle. I'm happy to be here. This is going to be just a great event. I'm going to treat it just like it's the X Factor. You know, when you got people voting and doing all these things, we'll just see how quick you are when we ask you questions along the way. I'm not sure where these 3 things about me came from, but I concur without comment on all of them. We have a great panel today. One thing I can assure you is that they are all very accomplished. And the 3 things that are common among all of them are the quality, achievement, and consistency that they possess as people and as professionals. You won't find anybody better, and really appreciate them being on board. So I'm going to first poll question for you guys, and you've got 5 seconds to answer that. For those of you who perhaps are not looking at this, what do you think is the most important to employers in a remote workforce? Availability, adaptability, being tech savvy, and meet expectations. You got 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, all right. We'll see who makes it into the final round.
Tony, folks are still voting, so let's give them a little bit more time than just 5 seconds. Let's give them 15.
Okay. I'll call the producers and make that adjustment.
Closing the poll now.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for those who participated in that. As Belle discussed, this presentation addresses what's really critical to employers during the remote workforce time that we have now. And frankly, it's before the COVID-19 hit us in this country. And frankly, what's going to happen once this thing dies down, whatever that is. We all believe that businesses are going to be making decisions in terms of how they can best function and organize themselves to be more effective and competitive in the marketplace. And for those who didn't appreciate the value of the remote workplace, perhaps they've got a change of opinion. So who we have with the panel today, as I said, four outstanding people. We've got Laura Early, who's the Deputy Director of Wise Advise, and then we have Laura Schmiegel, who works for Booz Allen. Again, two outstanding people and very professional what they have to do. Also, we have Shannon Sevigny, the President of RGS Construction. So we've got a very diverse panel. And then finally, we have Carrie Williams for Andana Consulting. So someone who's on the proposal development and marketing side, working directly with clients. So we got a very diverse group here, very knowledgeable, very professional, and that's great to be here. So now I've got another poll question for you. And again, if those of you who are not able to see this, I'll read it to you. Have you ever missed a deadline, say it isn't so, or been late to a meeting? Oh, that could never happen. More often than I'd like to admit. Never, I'm always on it, rarely, but it happens, or all the time. So anyone that you answered, I'm sure you've had some great reason why that happened, to include hurricanes and tornadoes at conferences that you wanted to fly to. So give it your best shot, and under great pressure from the producer, you'll have 15 seconds to respond.
Polls are still coming in, Tony, so let's give them a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Okay, guys. Oh, they're still going for it. So it looks like really, but it happens is at 69%, Tony. So what do you think?
Give them 10 more seconds.
Time's up now, but really, but
right,
it happens.
We're good.
It's 70%.
All right, we're good. Thanks everybody for responding. So now, first up, we're going to have a little discussion about time zones. So I'll give that to Laura Schmiegel to talk about that from her perspective.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you to everybody else for sharing your time with us today as well. Just to reiterate, my name is Laura Schmiegel. I'm the head of Military and Veteran Affairs at Booz Allen Hamilton. And to put a little context around my presentation, it probably helps to explain that as part of Military and Veteran Affairs, my team of 4 people is all virtual. We all live in, we're dispersed throughout 2 different time zones, but because of my role at Booz Allen, I work with all of our military talent, veterans, spouses, and Guard and Reserve, and those people are dispersed throughout the world, really. So all throughout the United States, continental and OCONUS, as well as our business offices in Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East. And so I have many, many meetings across multiple time zones. So it's really important if you're working at a place like Booz Allen, especially if you're working in the corporate side of Booz Allen, or if you're assigned overseas, to be mindful of time zones and develop some good working habits so that you can adapt. I would say the number one rule for probably all of the speakers today, but particularly for time zones, is communication. You need to develop a plan if your office doesn't have one, or if you're working remotely on an independent basis, about what hours you're going to be working and how you're going to adapt to being in a different time zone, and communicate that. If an employer hires you to work remotely across time zones, of course, they're going to expect that you're not going to be available from 9 to 5 on their time zone and able to do the same kinds of things on the same timelines as anyone else in this time zone. But it's very important to communicate that clearly, have firm rules and stick to them yourself, and communicate those with your employer so that expectations are managed. We have some ideas on the slides. I think that they're all good ideas and they're all related to the communication. The first one is about your work hours. I think a lot of people have different approaches to this. At Booz Allen, we have employees who just simply work different hours. I have a military spouse who's the head of our entire military spouse network over in Japan, and she gets up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and works until mid-afternoon, and then she has time with her kids. But we all know that those are the hours she's going to work, and so we know that we shouldn't schedule any meetings her time in the late afternoon to evening, but we can start 4:30, 5 o'clock her time, and that's how she manages the difference. So she can manage her work hours on a shared calendar. You can either say when you're in or when you're out, so people can see that on their time zone, or you can coordinate shifts. It can be an advantage when you're working in different time zones in some ways, because you can start a project, hand it off to somebody who's in a different time zone, and then pick it up again when you come back. So I think it's important to get creative when you're proposing to an employer, if you are, that you want to work in a different time zone, to say discuss what the advantages might be and how you can contribute to the team if you feel like you can. And also, again, to come with a plan to your employer about how you're going to manage the time difference, when you're going to work, and how you're going to communicate your availability to that employer. You can go to the next slide. It's kind of a continuation of what I said before. Be specific with your deadlines, with the workflow, your expectations on responses. If you know that you're not going to be able to respond to some emails right away, make sure that you communicate when they will get a response, whether it's because you are going to delay your response until they're at work, or whether you just aren't sleeping when they email you. Again, communicate everything, and it says scheduling software, but there's actually several tools you can use online to manage differences in time zones. Just to name a few, if you use Slack, there's an app called, I think, SpaceTime, where you can set your time and location right within Slack so people can see where you are on that. Gmail has an option called, I think it's Boomerang, that allows you to schedule your emails so that they can be sent at a particular time on someone else's schedule versus yours. Outlook has a time converter. I think we've all used whatever. If you use any of the major email applications or software, there's a converter for time zones so that you can schedule a meeting in someone else's time zone, or it automatically converts to their time zone when you move across. So be creative. Again, come with a plan and communicate how you're going to manage that difference between time zones. And I think you'll find a lot of employers these days will be very flexible and work with you. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Laura. I guess my view of time zones is going to have to change. I just used to ask the client, hey, what time do you get to work in the morning? If they say it's 6 o'clock, it's okay. You'll see my email at 6:01, so it's the first one on your email list. So I guess I've got to move on from that. Next, we're going to talk about adaptability, and we've got Carrie Williams on board for that. So give it a go, Carrie.
Thanks so much, Tony. So a little bit more about me than my fun facts. We are located in Baltimore, Maryland, but my team is virtual, and we work virtually with all of our clients. In fact, now we've got folks in the Philippines and in Guam that we're coordinating with. And within my Andana staff, we've got folks East Coast, Pacific time, and all the way through Pacific time. So we're managing a lot of the stuff that Laura just talked about too. In fact, a lot of our work is done on Central Time, so I'm always bouncing an hour back and forth between our time zone and their time zones. But it does make this adaptability such a key component to a remote workforce. being able to be flexible in how you work with people one-on-one and how you work with groups, how you have your work schedule set up for yourself. I think Laura gave a great example of her colleague in Japan who has such a strict work schedule and when she's available, and the rest of her team knows that. So that ability to communicate what you're trying to do with your team is really important. And part of that is adapting to a new style of communication. I think we're so used to being able to run down the hall and poke your head in someone's office, or, just quickly collaborate on something over a lunchroom break session. You don't have that in a virtual environment if you're a remote employee, even if you're on site embedded with an organization, or you're working with, a small team just in a remote location. You still need to be able to adapt to using the tools that are available to communicate with your staff and your team virtually. So you're going to be using tools like Slack or Google Drive or SharePoint or Teams or any of these other softwares that are out there. You need to be able to adapt to communicating in those fashions and to collaborating with your team and getting that feedback. You need to be able to communicate really clearly. As a remote employer or an employer of virtual team, we're communicating consistently. Just like Laura said, we've got tools that we use where we can tell each other when we're available, when we're online. We have a rule about uploading all of your work to our shared drive before you log off, so that we always have a good pulse on where projects are. And just like Laura mentioned, if someone in the East Coast is handing it off to somebody in California, then we're able to have a seamless transition of files and things like that. So you really, as a remote worker, as a virtual employee, need to be able to adapt to that workflow, which is different than what you would have if you were in an office and you're physically taking paper and putting it on someone's desk. So also another point is managing that workspace where you work. If you are now, as we saw earlier, folks working poolside, for folks working from the kitchen, there's people working everywhere in different locations that aren't really set up for working. So being able to adapt your workspace to your way of working. If you need it clear of distractions, if you need background noise to be playing, whatever those pieces are, make sure that you create your setup so that you're functioning in a place that works best for you, and that you're not trying to sneak in a little bit of work while you're cooking dinner. It's possible and totally happens all the time, but you can't make that your best practice. You need to make sure that you're adapting wherever you're working, whether it's at your home, in a remote office, or on site with a customer, that you're creating a space that helps you be productive. And Tony, that's all I have about adapting to this remote work environment.
Looks like Tony's on mute. The famous question that we keep on asking ourselves over and over again. Yes.
Okay, I'm in
Tony,
huge violation of my own presentation. A huge violation. So those of you who do your critiques, noted, Tony's needs to learn how to handle the phone and mute and all that. Got a poll question for you. So far this year, how many new technology tools have you had to learn? So multiple choice, 0, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, or 4 or more. And there's so many tools out there these days that there is no right or wrong answer. Just to check to see how flexible you have to had to become over the years, and now you have to adapt to the various ways people communicate.
Okay, so Tony, we are still the poll open as folks are still voting their way through, and looks like the front winner right now is 2 to 3. So 2 to 3 new technology tools they've learned. A follow-up question might be, what are those? Because obviously, is it Teams meetings? What kind of tools is it that you're learning? So that could be another good poll to ask the audience. So 2 to 3 new technology tools seems to be the front winner here at 41%. We're going to close the poll now. Thank you for answering, and please just toggle back to the closed poll to view the results.
Thanks. Thanks for responding, everybody. So now we're going to talk about tools and security. And we've got Shannon Sevigny, who's going to be talking about that.
Actually, I am not talking about tools and security.
I think it's me.
Okay. I stand corrected because I can't even read my own notes. So who will that be? That's, I'll give that to Laura.
Yeah. Hey everyone, so great to be with you today. Just to give you a little bit of my background, so I know what I'm talking about when it comes to tools and security. Wise Advisence's team is a 100% remote team. So we have 42 team members, all in the military connected community that work all over the world. And so we use all kinds of tools to not only work within our team, but to also serve our clients. So collaborative tools are essential, but about some different ones. Shared drives, making sure that people can access files when they need to is super important. If you can't get the files that you need in order to do your job, you're not going to be able to do it. So here's some examples: Dropbox, SharePoint, Google Drive, Mimecast. And when we go into task management software or project management software, as a lot of these are called, there's a huge variety in these. And so I always like to say, when I'm talking about tools and software, you have to find the ones that work best for you and for your organization. So ask people who work in roles similar to you what they use and what they like about that tool and what the tool is missing, so that you can make sure it's going to be effective for you. So some examples of project management softwares or task management softwares are Trello and Asana. We actually use Teamwork Projects at Wise. I love it. It's super robust, and it allows you to do, it has a shared drive within it, and it also allows you to do time tracking and some different things within the actual tasking software. But what these softwares allow you to do in project management tools, they allow you to task things to yourself, to other people. You can put deadlines, you can add graphics, you can add files to it. You can actually even comment within the task. So it keeps things really organized, so you don't have to go sorting through your email to figure out, now what did Shannon ask me to do? Did she ask me to make a blue graphic or a pink graphic? I can go into the tool, I can go on the task, and I can see exactly what those instructions are. And so if you don't use these, I highly recommend that you get one today to keep yourself organized, to keep your team organized. And then time tracking is really important, especially for us as a virtual team. I don't see anyone that I work with outside of their little square box. So I have no idea if they came to the office today. So it's really important that they're tracking their time and we're able to see what they were working on and when. So some examples of those are Hubstaff, Trello does it, Asana allows it, Teamwork has it. We use Harvest at Wise. So there's a lot of different time tracking tools. The biggest thing you want to look for in time tracking softwares, if you are an employer looking to add one, is make sure that it's going to pull the information that you need and that you're going to be able to pull. For us, something that's really important for us is we have to be able to invoice our clients based on the time tracked. So that's something that we have to have, a capability that we have to have that certain softwares don't offer. And then obviously you're going to replace face-to-face communication with apps. We highly recommend video streaming apps because, again, you only get to see about this much of someone, but that much is so much more important than just talking over the phone. So many things are lost in translation through email, through texting. You don't know someone's tone of voice. You don't know their personality. You don't get to know those things through text communication. So video communication is really important when you're working in the virtual space so that you can build trust and build relationships with your team in order to have successful communication in the future. So Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Zoom, Google Meet, Google Hangouts, those are all examples of chat softwares. And then obviously for texting, we talked a little bit about Slack. If you're not on Slack and you have a virtual team, I highly recommend it. It allows you to connect with your team all in one place, have different channels for communication, as well as we have channels at Wise that are for wins, celebrating wins with our team. We have a water cooler channel where we talk about what's going on in our lives and our families so that people can connect on a deeper level and it's not just all about work all the time. So highly recommend, if you do not have what we call a software deck, a stack deck for your organization, definitely get one. And the best thing about all of these tools listed, so many of them interact together and they actually work together. So I mentioned Slack. You can actually get your Asana, Trello, Teamwork, Zoom notifications in Slack. So you don't have to have all the tools open at once. They also integrate with your calendar. We talked about Google Calendar earlier. They all integrate together so that you can actually preload the video link for your call into your Google Calendar invite that gets sent out. So make sure that you're not only looking at the softwares individually that you need, the tools that you need, but also how they interact together so that you can have a successful stack, so that you're not having to get 10 softwares when really you could use 3 that would accomplish everything that you need.
Thanks, Laura.
Hey, Tony.
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to chime in too, and from the employer perspective, when we're bringing on remote employees, it's important that, you know, as employees, you take ownership of these tools that are provided, so that you learn how to use them. You set up the workflows like Laura was talking about. If they are integrating, make sure that you get that working. But also keep in mind that you don't want to add additional software or tools. You don't want to use an unapproved chat function or something like that. We have a lot of, the security is one of the titles on this slide, so a lot of issues around security, and you guys probably all have your IT teams. They're dealing with phishing scams and crazy emails that come out with links that are not actual invoices being sent. So just making sure that as an employee in a remote team that you're using what your company or your organization gives you, and that you're adapting to those tools, because you don't want to add in something new that might not be approved, especially if you are doing government contracting, even as a consultant. You want to make sure that you're using government approved software, the FedRAMP tool that has everything on there, making sure that you're following those guidelines so you're not going to get your company in trouble for using something that's not approved.
And if your company doesn't provide you with those, ask. And you can also go online, like in our actual applications, it talks about the level of security that you have to have on your computer. A lot of people don't know that just when you get a regular computer, there's not security built in. So make sure that you're reading through that when you are looking at job descriptions to make sure that you have all the security points that you need for your internet. The internet's not a secure place to be, as everyone's mentioned. So just make sure that you're looking at those security precautions, like everyone said, and you're making sure that you have 2-factor authorization and the different things that are required. And again, if you're working for a company, they should provide those to you so you can ask their IT department how to get all that stuff installed on your computer if they don't provide you with a computer that already has it pre-installed.
Yeah, and I was looking at the chat. Lori said that Teams is military approved. Teams and the whole Microsoft 365 platform is on the FedRAMP list. So, or Google Drive at the professional level, things like that. So employers can go and research their softwares to see what's on the approved list if your IT people don't know or need to be, understand where things are in the process.
Thanks, Carrie Ann, and also Laura. I'd also like to emphasize, as my fumbling the mute proves, that the more sophisticated we get, the more situationally aware we also need to be using these tools. And it is one of those things where the more you use it, the better you get at it. The less you use it, it's like starting all over again. So it's one of those things there. Once you've your company is committed, or you personally have committed to using these tools, you got to take the time to practice, rehearse, and really be comfortable with it, so that when it's showtime, you don't do what I did and fumble with the mute.
While we're still on the security topic, I saw Elizabeth had a question about which tools have the worst security. Laura, you might know more than I do. I'm not an IT security expert, but what I would just advise is, if you are going to join in house party app with your friends or family, do it on your non-work issued equipment. If it's something that you have access to servers or you're connected to your work ecosystem on your work computer, then just don't download that onto that machine. And then, if it is something that's sketchy, and we have a friend that works in cybersecurity here in Maryland, and he will only use certain platforms for our our friend happy hours because he's so security conscious. So I would just, if you get something that it doesn't look great, then maybe recommend another tool that you can use that is more secure.
The biggest thing to remember is you want a closed source platform, not an open source platform. So open source means anyone can get in, pretty much hack it and figure it out. Trello is one of those. But if you want a closed source platform, which means that your company has an individual kind of server on it, you can log in, there's password protection. Those are the things you really want to look for. So if you just Google open source and closed source, if you're looking for something for yourself, you'll be able to find great recommendations. But like everyone said, if you're working for the government or you're working for a corporation, they should tell you exactly what you can use and what you can't use. There's going to be a lot more restrictions than if you're a private company like ours.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. It also depends on the sort of contract that you have. That there's so many things that dictate what you can or cannot use. So this is serious business now, and I really appreciate the comments. Time for a new poll. The question is, how long have you been using shared drives, task management software, and time tracking software? And there's a multitude of years you can select. So please do so. Some of us were using shared drives that have so many different names to them, back in the day, as you say, that they've been out of the net for a long time. But in fact, they were the tools of the day, and we had to use them. And as slow and cumbersome as they might have been, that was what we were using.
Okay, so Tony, when in doubt, always choose option C in a multiple choice question. So that's what the folks have decided to choose. 5 to 15 years seems to be our top choice at 52%. 23% as 3 to 5 years, 0 to 2, and 16 plus. So obviously millennials and the older folks were kind of split between, and that's the results of the poll. So 5 to 15 years is the answer.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, next we're going to talk about workload, and Shannon will be discussing that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Sevigny with RJS Construction. I'm the president and CEO, and we are celebrating 30 years in business this year. So here at RJS, we're pretty excited. We do have 6 satellite offices here at RJS, and only across 2 time zones, but we have clients across all the time zones in the United States. So we often have to deal with time zones and scheduling. So always things to be aware of when you're working with different clients and employees. In addition to our satellite offices, we also have people working from home and people working on the job site. So we might just have superintendents on the job site, or we might have job trailers with several employees there as well. So these are all things that we had to consider when we were putting this together and thinking about, okay, do these all these criteria apply to all of our employees that are working off site? And they do. We have key communication things that we apply to all, and some different situations have different challenges, and some have different benefits. But I think the most important thing that we have discovered is that it comes down to having a good relationship. You have to have a good relationship that is established between the employer and the employee, and or the supervisor and the employee. And this isn't going to happen overnight. My husband always has to remind me, don't be a racehorse. be a plow horse. We're in this for the long run. It's not a sprint. We have to take our time, and all these relationships take time to develop. So remember that, you know, when you're hired on in a company, you're not gonna get everything right away. It takes time for these things to develop. And part of that is figuring out how each person communicates. And we have to figure out how they best share their information, how they work, what kind of habits they have. Are they freshest in the morning or in the evening? What kind of strengths and weaknesses does each person have? So part of this developing the relationship comes down to trust. And we have a great team here at RJS. And one of the first things we look for in our employees is integrity. We want to make sure that we can trust these employees. And but it's something that takes time to build up. So once again, it's just you have to be in it for the long term. And the other thing we've discovered is that people who work remotely, whether it's on the job site or in an office or just when they're working from home, they are definitely the ones that are the most difficult to communicate with, but also it's the most important that we take the time to communicate properly with them. So one of the things that as you're creating your relationship with these people, there's a few basics that we followed. And so number one, you need to be very clear regarding giving directions to your employees or asking for directions. I would much prefer an employee to ask a ton of questions, clarifying questions, and questions to reiterate or follow up on what I've asked to make sure that we are on the same page. That helps with the workload. We make sure that my employee is doing what I've asked them to do and not going off on a tangent. I've had employees spend multiple days rewriting a contract so it wouldn't be a PDF and putting it into a Word format or something that's going to be easier to fill. And it's like, and then after they've spent this time, they said, "Oh, look what I did." And I say, "Thank you. However, that's already been done. You just didn't ask, and it's right here on the server." So, you know, communicating both ways is so important. Also, knowing the expectations of your employer. Are they okay with flexibility in your schedule? Are they okay with you working a few hours in the morning, taking time off in the afternoon to take care of your children, and then working in the evening? And many employees that works great for. We had one employee that wanted to do that, and we weren't able to hire them because we need them to be available from 8 to 5. And as much as I would have loved to hire an employee and help them take care of their children, because I'm a big proponent of working mothers and women who want to take care of their children, or men, but I still need my employees to be available within a certain time frame. And depending on where you work, that's, as the others have discussed, it's going to be more flexible or less flexible. As you speak to your employee, or as employees you talk to your employer, parrot back what they are saying to you, so you make sure that you're on the same page. And so, are you asking me to do this, or are you talking about this specific thing? And it just makes it so much easier. And we've often done that and realized, oh, we were talking about completely different topics because one of us was not as clear as we thought we were being. And I think, you know, they've already talked about working with other communication styles and schedules. Ask questions. We all are going to be learning together how to work together. Many times when I ask my employees for more details on things, they kind of get a little bit frustrated, and it's often not because I'm trying to check up on them or, you know, spy on them. I just want to know what they're doing. I want to know if, are they ahead of schedule? Are they behind schedule? And so we've often asked them, please tell me where you are with your workload. We meet on a weekly basis to make sure that people who need help, if people aren't working extra that week, then they can come back in and help people who have more of a heavy workload that week, or vice versa. So weekly meetings, as was discussed, can help with laying out expectations and dividing the workload. Many times, you know, people who write proposals, they'll have a crazy week where they have an inordinate amount of proposals that have to go out, and somebody else may work in a different department, but they can say, oh no, I can help you format, or I can help you proofread or whatever for your proposal. So that way, when you meet on a regular basis, you can help each other out with things that may be going on. So I really encourage employees to let your employer know if your workload is too heavy or if your workload is too light, because we as employers, we don't have a magic ball and know how everyone is doing. Don't be offended if your employer asks to be copied on emails. Very often when I have new employees, I just ask them to copy me on especially important emails, so I can just know how they're communicating with our clients, how they're communicating with our subcontractors. And often, even my husband who works with me, we will do the same. Hey, can you copy me on that so I just know what's going on? Don't be offended if your employer asks you to look at an email, an important email, before they send it out. I often will ask other people in my office, hey, can you look at this? Can you look at this email? I'm concerned how I'm coming across in this email. Does it sound like I'm being combative? Does it sound like I'm being wimpy? Does it sound like I'm you know, being too needy? Does it, you know, I don't often know how it's coming across. So don't be offended if an employer asks for you to fill them in on what's going on. And I think something that's very important, especially in the construction industry, is we need to, they were talking earlier about knowing how your employees are doing. And don't assume that your employer or supervisor knows what's going on in your life. It's okay to remind your employer that, you know, your kids are sick, or your grandmother died, or your husband is going, is getting laid off. Because as an employer, I specifically have one employee that I knew when she was having issues in her marriage. She was going through a divorce, and when things were really difficult, her work would not be as complete. And then when she was having a good day, her work was fabulous. And because I had that open line of communication, I was able to realize what was going on in her life and help her out and give her more support when she needed it. But as I was mentioning earlier, in the construction industry, suicide is a huge issue, and it's one of the highest suicide rates in the construction industry than in other industries. So keeping a mental pulse on your employees is so important, especially the remote workers. And so we often have to take the time to check in with them and just maybe talk a little bit about more personal things for those guys that are on the job site and those women that are on the job site and don't have as much communication as others. And I would really hope that they would be able to share their struggles and successes with us. And often, as an employer, I have to remember that I have to share the overview and vision of the company. So I may not explain why I have assigned work, or certain people have certain items that need to be accomplished. And my youngest son is willing to go along with anything as long as he knows the final destination. And when we change things up all the time, it drives him crazy. But if he knows what our final destination is, then he's good to go. And I think that as employers and employees, we all have to realize what our final destination is, whether that's for the week, whether that's for a certain project, whether that's the vision for the company, or the vision just for that season of the year. And here at RJS, we want our employees to succeed professionally and also personally. So when we see our employees succeeding, and then we see that our company can be stronger, be more productive, and then as a team, we have an amazing company and we can accomplish great things. So I just encourage you to have that open line of communication as you organize your workload and as you organize your company.
Thanks. This is a great segue to back to Laura Early, who talks a little bit about who will talk a little bit about standards in terms of the responsibilities of employers and employees.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I love everything you said. It's so true, and good communication and building trust is so important when you're working virtually. But the biggest thing is we're going to talk a little about is standards. Understanding what your employer's standards are. Like Shannon just talked about, you need to know what the expectation is in order to meet the expectation. So you need to have a general understanding of what the standards are, and if there's any that need to change in order to fit working remotely. That's something that a lot of organizations have been working through over the last 3 months. There's some things that you do when you work in an office that just don't work when you're working remotely. And so that's really important to remember. If you are an employer and you're moving remote, you have to be open to what needs to change in order to be successful as a remote team. But it's your responsibility as an employee to inform your employer of your schedule and workload. Like we talked about, I wish I had a crystal ball as a boss and I knew exactly what my team members were thinking all the time and knew when they were working, but I don't. I have to trust that when for us, we have a little bit more flexibility for our employees than others. And so we don't mandate specific working hours. We go off of more making sure they have their work done. So you need to look at what your employer is requiring. Do they require that you work from 8 to 5? Because a lot of employers and corporate employers, even if you work remotely, you still work a regular full business day. And that's really important to understand with remote work. I think a lot of people think, oh, remote work, I'll be, dressed from the waist up, PJs from the waist down. I'll have my kids around me. I'll be working from the couch. I'll have Netflix in the background. And that's what remote work is. It's so not. And so especially if you work for an employer or for a corporation, you're going to have a schedule. So make sure that you know what that schedule is before you go in. Or if you do have an employer, maybe like us, that's a little bit more flexible with schedules, that you're letting us know what your schedule is. And then workload. Do you have enough work to do? Because what I think you can get done in an hour is probably a little bit different than what you can actually get done in an hour. So you need to communicate, hey, Laura, you've given me way too much work and I can't get it done today. Or, hey, I have so much time. I'm sitting around eating ice cream because I got all my work done in 2 hours. So you have to have communication with your employer, and you need to understand that. But yes, Carrie Ann just said, flexibility totally depends on the company, not where you're physically working. Absolutely, 100%. It depends on the company that you're working with and for. You need to have an understanding, both employers and employees, of when you need to be flexible. And how are you going to communicate that today's the day we're being flexible, today's the day we're not being flexible? So for example, with us, with WISE, we're not flexible on deadlines. Most companies are not. The deadline is the deadline. If you're not going to be able to get something done by the deadline, you have to communicate that with me so that we can either backfill or figure out what we're going to do. So you have to figure out with your employer, and really they should be communicating with you their standards and expectations around flexibility and what they're flexible around and what they're not, so that you have a clear understanding as an employee of what's expected of you, when you're supposed to be at your desk working, when maybe they're a little flexible on how many breaks, when you take your breaks or when you take your lunch, but you need to communicate, hey, Laura, I'm taking my lunch at 3 o'clock today so I can go to an appointment instead of at noon. Because if you don't tell me that, and you typically take your lunch every day at noon, and I'm calling you at 3 o'clock wondering where are you, and you're taking your lunch. So again, that communication is so important in the virtual space. Expectations and roles have to be clearly defined. Clarity is essential in all business all the time, but especially working remotely, because again, I can't walk down the hall past your office and see, oh, there's Tony, he's here, he's working today. I have to ask questions, and I have to ask clarifying questions to make sure, like Shannon talked about, do I understand what you want me to do when you want me to do it? Brene Brown uses this phrase called painting done. What does done look like? And painting done for your employee or your employer, if you're the employer, making sure that you guys have a clear understanding of what done looks like. Does done look like a PDF? Does done look like an Excel spreadsheet? Because we all have different views of how things should be done. So if you're feeling uncertain or lacking direction, absolutely discuss it with your employer. Employers are not magicians, like we've said. We don't know everything. And so sometimes our blind spot is your schedule or your workload, and we have no idea because you're not telling us. So it's really important for you to ask questions. And if you feel unclear, you're getting that clarity from your employer. And then again, like we've said several times, if your employer is asking you questions, it's not because maybe they don't trust you or they think you're doing a bad job or this, that, or whatever personal thing. It's probably because they just need clarity and understanding on what you're doing and what's going on. So it's really important. Expect feedback, coaching, and reviews from your employer, just as you would in a traditional environment. Again, I'm a huge Brene Brown person, but she says to be clear is to be kind, and to be unclear is to be unkind. And with us at WISE, I say that every single day. I'm going to be clear with you. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to give you constructive feedback, because if you don't know what you're doing well and what you're not doing well, you're never going to grow and get better and continue to do the things that I think you do well, and stop doing the things that you're not doing so well, or fix it and change it. So definitely expect the same type of feedback and reviews as you would. It's still a work environment. Just because I'm sitting in my home office and Tony's in his home office and Laura's in her home office doesn't mean we're not at work together. It's still a working relationship. It's still a job. So you're still going to have those things. Remote team members need to follow corporate policies for security. We talked about that earlier. It's really important that you understand the security expectations of your role, and that you're following those things, especially when it talks about here storage, where you're storing equipment, where you're storing your laptop. If you work for the government, have a government laptop, are you allowed to take it on vacation with you or not? Can it leave your home? Can it not? We all have like codes on our phone. If you have your email on your phone, we require that there's a code on your phone so that someone can't just come in and answer your phone. So make sure that you have an understanding of security, and it depends on your company what that security is going to be, and what that looks like. So again, communicate, and make sure that you know what the expectation is of you. I think someone just put in here, I saw it in a second, like, how do you recommend getting feedback? There's lots of different ways to get and receive feedback. I'm a big believer at the best time to give feedback is when you have it in the moment directly to the person that you have it for. I don't want to hear from someone else that you have a problem with me. I want to hear from you what the problem is, because guess who can't fix your problem with me? Tony can't fix it, but I can fix the problem that you have with me. So again, making sure you're giving feedback to the right person. And this goes for employers and employees. Conflict is this thing that we all don't like, but it's part of life and part of your role. And one of the best things that you can do is approach a situation and a conversation, put the elephant on the table, drop them there, and just say, hey, this is a weird, awkward conversation for me, but I really need to talk to you about that spreadsheet that you turned in yesterday. And go on. Let people know that it's hard for you as an employer. Let people know that it's hard as an employee. It's hard to give feedback. People get nervous about it, but give it to the person that it's for, in a timely manner. If you tell me 6 months from now that I did something today that was wrong or upset you or wasn't correct, 6 months from now, I'm going to be like, where was I? What was going on? I don't even remember. So I'm not going to be able to fix it. So you want to make sure that you do it in a timely manner. Do we have another slide? I'm not sure.
Now the Q&A slide. No, thanks, Laura. I really appreciate it. One of the interesting dynamics that we have now is that it's one thing to have a company where everybody worked together, and now they have to work remote because of COVID-19. versus a company that is remote from the beginning. So you have an interesting dynamic of maybe being familiar with quite a few people up front on one side, but on another side, your only familiarity with someone is remote from the beginning. So that puts a lot of pressure on doing exactly what we've been talking about today is, sometimes being able to see the person is what you need in order to develop a relationship and, see the mannerisms and all that. And, sometimes maybe you need to hear some background noise to just kind of get a feel for things. But in other cases, it's being able to ask direct questions and set an environment in place where you can get a direct answer. The only other thing I would add is companies have employee handbooks that everybody's supposed to read, and everybody signs the notices they've read it. But then you find yourself having a multitude of SOPs being written that never make it into the employee handbook. And so now you've got a dynamic of, well, make sure you read the employee handbook because it's going to tell you everything you need to know. And then, oh, by the way, here are a list of SOPs that someday are going to make it in there. So it's always taken into account where you are today and how that's going to be communicated and be effective to the person receiving it. So it's one of these things where we have to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, wherever they are, to at least appreciate the perspective of the relationship. That's easier said than done because sometimes you can't do that in person. We do have some Q&A questions that I think some people have asked. One of the ones that I find interesting is from Cindy Lincecum was, hey, when there's a lot of noise in the background, how do you let people know that, hey, can you cut the noise out or something? And there's really no easy way to do it, but the common theme has always been, hey, it sounds like somebody hasn't put their microphone on mute. Could you please do that? And you keep it general and it applies, but then you really know people are paying attention if it doesn't happen. They don't change. They go, hey, listen, you're so-and-so, because we're on Microsoft Teams, I could tell that you're making noise because your video's in front of me. So there are a lot of ways that you can call people out, but the biggest thing is to, hey, listen, up front, cell phones off or mute, all this stuff's mute, and you just have to be constantly remind people of that. I mean, I had my phone on mute, and I know it's funny because it was silly for me, but that's going to happen all the time because you are trying to be respectful and not have extra noise, and then you get caught up in a conversation and you forget to turn the mute off and talk. So it's just a lot of dynamics, and all that's going to get ironed out. Another question. This may be the final question, but I'd like everybody here to answer it. What do you like and or dislike about working in an office? Let's start with Laura Schmiegel, then Carrie, then Laura Early, then Shannon. What do you like about being in an office? Or not like?
Well, what I liked about being in an office before this hit, I've always worked remote at least a day or two a week. And what I liked about the office is that most of the team I work with is in an open floor concept on one floor of a building. And I found that it actually reduced my calendar because I could go and talk to somebody for 5 or 10 minutes. I didn't have to slot that 30 minutes with them on the phone or 15 minutes with them. And so I actually had fewer appointments when I worked in an office, at least some of the time. That said, I have 2 kids, 16 and 13. My husband works from home. I'm a very early riser, and I tend to lose gas at the end of the day. Hopefully no one's noticed it yet. So what I like about remote work is just that extreme flexibility of being able to get up at 5 a.m. if I want and knock out a few hours and then work until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go home for an hour or two, check my emails until 10 and go to bed. Like that flexibility of time for, I think, working mothers is really useful.
Okay, we got about 30 seconds left. Anybody got anything else to add in like 10 seconds or less?
I love remote work. I've been doing it for 5 years, my entire life. Basically, work life is remote. It's just learning. You have to learn yourself. You have to learn what you need in order to be successful, what type of environment you need to be in. Your family needs to learn how you work and working remotely. It's an adjustment. And so that's the biggest thing I always like to tell everyone is like remote work isn't just like an automatic great thing that you figure out in one day, and it's different for everybody's, but you have to set up your environment for success, set up your family and your people who live in your home with you, an understanding so that you can be successful. But it takes time to learn your rhythm and to learn the rhythms of working remotely.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Hey, I want to thank everybody on the panel. That you won't find a higher quality of level of personnel to talk about this. Appreciate those who attended virtually. You got any more questions, comments? Please provide feedback on all this. It may be the way of the future, depending on the success of this and other events. But with that, again, thanks Belle for putting this on. And
Tony, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to take the digital floor away from you before you conclude. And just to say thank you to you. You look very dapper today. Amazing job orchestrating the ladies. And thanks to, I'm going to say in order of the cameras, thanks to Laura, Carrie Ann, Laura, and Shannon for sharing your expertise with our audience. Guys in the audience, hopefully you found our session valuable and you will join us again on, I dropped my earpiece. So join us again May 21st, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Daytime. The topic is reality of remote work and work-life balance, which is particularly interesting as we're all noticing our work hours have expanded. So at the end, and actually I just wanted to say, no one mentioned commute. Isn't this like a lifesaver, not having to commute just from one room to the other? But anyway, that's another point. So at the end of the webinar, you will be redirected to our JTC website where you can check out the great program we have for you. If you are registered, you can visit the Attendee Service Center and make your session selections. Don't worry if you change your mind. You'll have up to 1 hour prior to when the session starts to confirm. This concludes the webinar for today. Thanks again for joining us. Please disconnect and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.